Hi, everyone. My name is Sara Dahan. Thank you so much for being here for this talk about community and COVID and how we can be leaders for our teams and for our audiences. It's going to be a really, really great conversation, and I'm so happy that you're here. I'm very grateful that you took time out of your day, especially when things are so out of the ordinary and you might be dealing with childcare or family or job issues. So I really appreciate it. And I also want to know, how are you doing? Not really the normal, how are you doing, where people say, like, okay, good. But really, like, how are you doing? I've been starting all of my conversations just really wanting to gauge where people are at. And I know you can't respond to me personally, but I'll share that today's going pretty okay. Mostly wrangling cats, and later today I'm going to go on a video call with about 30 of my relatives. So uh, that'll be interesting. Just taking things day by day, and I'm really glad that we're going to have this discussion about something that's so important to me. So I actually run a community strategy agency. It's my job to help brands and businesses build communities for their audiences, run their mission. And it's just very cool thinking about how many different ways a brand can engage an audience in that way. I've given a few TED Talks about it. I've been written up in Forbes, only just to say that I've been doing this for a long time, and it's something that is really close to my heart. I also have a master's in epidemiology, which is uh, uniquely useful during this time. I actually specialized in social epidemiology, which is how someone's environment and cultural influences and background affects their health, both physical and mental. So, just kind of thinking about how the pandemic is influencing our health, not just in terms of COVID, but in terms of our own sanity and our friendships and connections and resources that we usually turn to for support. It's really time to step in as leaders and fill some of those gaps, because now people have a bunch of needs that they didn't have a month ago. So yeah, I'm excited to dive in. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm just really, really humbled. So today we're going to talk about community in the age of Corona. So thinking about how this pandemic will shift brand strategy and leadership to be more human centric, so that we are being very altruistic and helpful, but we're also helping our own business and brand survive. I'm here to help you. I want to help you get through this using these tools and strategies. Why does community have a place in marketing? For people that aren't familiar with community based marketing, I just want to do some really interesting stuff about how before the pandemic, we were actually already in an epidemic. We were having a loneliness epidemic where about 47% of Americans were reporting feeling often alone or left out, which is really crazy when you think about it, that almost half the country was feeling lonely. Loneliness can be as dangerous as obesity or smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So it's a really big deal. And to integrate community into marketing just solves so many problems, because you're helping your audience get this really important need of authentic, real connections in their life. And you're also building a highly engaged audience with your brand. So it can be just a really, really amazing tool for organic marketing and create a really loyal audience. So there are a few ways to integrate community into branding and marketing. This is stuff that we go through in my agency, where we have a few touch points that we like to hit on when we're designing these communities. So the first one is high-level branding, which doesn't really seem like it's part of community strategy, because when you think of mission statements and organizational values and language and visual language and stuff like that, you don't really think of a community but it's actually highly, highly ingrained into all of those things because you want to make sure that the message that you are projecting to your audience is very much communicating. We are all about you, the audience. We want to help you. Here's the value that we are offering by creating something so much bigger than this brand, something that you don't just have to be a fan of or witness. You are actually part of it. You are part of the brand, and the brand is loyal to its audience in that way. So that's one aspect of community strategy. And that high level branding and messaging will trickle down into all of the other parts. So the next kind of community strategy is how you are representing your community and your brand externally, like through content strategy or email newsletters or any kind of interaction that you might have with outside world. What kinds of messages are you sending and values, and how are you actually responding to them? How does that communicate about your culture and your community and what it's like to be part of your brand? And the last one is actual community building. So when you walk into a room or when you walk into a virtual space like a Facebook group or a Slack community, what does it feel like? What is the atmosphere, the feeling? What are people doing? What's the programming? If it's online, are there moderation scenarios? If it's in person, how are you setting that container? That's the kind of community strategy that you might think of first. Of what does that community actually look like? And for all of these things, they should really be feeding into each other. And it's not just a niche thing that a few brands are doing. A study by First Round Capital actually found that 80% of founders use community as a really integral part of their business, and 28% of them describe community as their moat and very critical to their success. So, what does this mean for a pandemic? Because all the things that I just described sound really nice, but there are a lot of companies that don't have a budget for community or don't have the resources. So it's a little bit of a different landscape now because in a pandemic, people's needs are really, really essential. People have a lot of emotional needs. They're in a crisis. They don't know what to do. Things are very much about survival and extreme loneliness. If we were in a loneliness epidemic before, this pandemic is exaggerating it in really, really extreme ways. So to give your customers a way to connect with you and with each other and get these really essential survival-oriented needs met is really crucial at this point because people's attention is divided. They're thinking about their family and themselves and how they're going to make rent. So if you're going to penetrate that attention, then you need to be helping them in a really immediate way. They need to be depending on you and going to you for help. So it's not a tool just for growth. It's actually necessary for survival now, for you to be community oriented and human oriented and just be empathetic to your audience's experience. We're in a really unique time where your previous offerings or products or services might not be as relevant. So in order to survive, you have to really put yourself in the shoes of your customer. Think how they would think. Try to imagine what they're going through and pivot so that you are being a resource to them and you're empathizing with their situation and maybe even providing them with hope. So definitely think about your messaging. Do not use the pandemic as an opportunity to exploit. People are really sensitive to that and they'll tune into it really fast. So don't be tone deaf. Don't say, hey, this thing is actually like really necessary for you right now. And if it's not, then people will see that and be like, I don't know about the integrity of this brand. Really, you want to make sure that whatever impression you're giving during this pandemic is one that will last, because right now people are kind of scrambling to get their lives in order to find solid footing, and they might not have expendable income right now, but later they will be voting with their dollars. So if you stepped in, if you helped people, if you helped people on the front lines, if you helped people working at home, if you helped parents, if you helped homeless people, people will remember that. So you kind of have to figure out what is going to be your offering. How are you going to be the hero who steps in and saves the day, and then builds that trust and that loyalty, and it will come back to you later. So that's something that's really important in community building in general. It's just that you have to highlight how giving you are and not necessarily expect things in return. Especially in a crisis like this, it doesn't really make sense to say, "Hey, we're gonna give away all of these masks, but make sure you buy this thing." More about just everyone doing the best that we can to help this situation. So definitely have emotive positioning and messaging that try to be as human and real as possible. You might have noticed from the promotional emails you've been getting or messages that you've been seeing around social media that right now a lot of founders are being very visible, a lot of founders and CEOs. So if you want to highlight your founder or CEO or any kind of leader and just say, we are humans too. We're not brands. We're actually humans that are going through the exact same situation. I think that that's really great. Just highlighting the humanity of your internal organization and how that carries into you elevating the humanity of your audience. So interestingly, community strategy doesn't actually look super different in COVID. Because what I was talking about before about high-level branding, you might already have your brand in place, but think about your brand during the pandemic. You still need to come up with that big messaging, those values. How are you going to be inspirational and helpful during the pandemic? Then for the external representation, one way to do that in the pandemic is just how are you reaching the outside world? So are you donating things? Are you creating a new offering? What exactly are you doing to represent your values and how you specifically can be helpful to people around you? And then for the actual community aspect, things might not be exactly the same, like building a community around a brand for things that might not be quite as relevant during an emergency, but connection is just as important as it was before. It's actually even more important because we're in a crisis and people are scared. They need support. So if you can find a way to get people together in really meaningful ways, then that's a really great way to show how you are oriented to community during this time. I'll just give a few examples of what these things can look like. So for the high-level messaging, here are some brands that are definitely implementing that and showing the world, we get it, we are in this situation together, we're bonding together in solidarity and trying to do our best to get people to understand how important this is, even if it means losses in business. So the first one is Jeep. You might not be able to tell, but it's basically a photo from the viewpoint of the engine of Jeep looking out into the inside of a garage. So they're saying the best view for these days is inside, stay at home. And McDonald's launched an ad that showed the arches that were separated to communicate about social distancing. This actually received a little bit of backlash, which is interesting, but I think it's because it was a little bit early in the pandemic and people weren't really sure how big of a deal it was. And then the next one is Nike. It's an Instagram post that said, if you ever dreamed of playing for millions around the world, now is your chance. So they're promoting playing online with people. So they're basically saying, play inside, play for the world. You can still be connected, and this is the socially responsible thing to do. Coca-Cola said staying apart is the best way to stay united. IKEA in Israel created this diagram that basically said all you need right now is to build your home, like the key, the lock, the toilet paper, open doors are bad. And skin condoms was really creative because there's a trending hashtag all over the world that says stay the fuck at home. And they actually made a hashtag that said stay and fuck at home. And they said coming is safer than going. Stuff like that that's kind of like raunchy and funny, but they're still saying we care about keeping people safe, and this is an emergency, so people have to take it seriously. And Burger King said, instead of home of the Whopper, they said stay home. So these are all ways that these huge brands that are taking a really, really big risk by telling people to stay home, not see their friends, not have fun, do this thing that's really hard. They're taking a risk and potentially accepting losses to their business because they want to keep people safe, because they're prioritizing human lives over their brand. So that's actually communicating a lot to consumers. And when all this is over, people will remember that there are a few giants that took a stand really early. So then the next kind, which is like helping communities around you, pivoting your offerings and just saying, how are you going to be the hero? These are some really interesting examples. So first we have Coursera, which is trying to help teachers. So they're offering a bunch of curriculum and coursework for free. The next one is West Elm. They're like a retail store for interior decorating and design. So they ended up designing virtual backgrounds for Zoom so that you can still be in a really chic space, but it's for your conference calls. The next one is Virgin Atlantic. So they're doing rescue flights for people who aren't in their home countries, and a bunch of flights and airports are closed. They're definitely a hero that's bringing people home. The next one is Skoda, which is a car company from the Czech Republic, and they published this image of all of the like critical points that you have to make sure are clean. To me, that's a very practical, helpful piece of advice. That they're not saying buy our cars. They're saying we understand a lot of people are in their cars right now, and these are things that you have to keep in mind to stay healthy and safe. The next one is L'Oreal, that channels a lot of their production and manufacturing to hand sanitizer. Lululemon is giving $2 million of emergency funds to ambassadors and small businesses. They're saying we're a giant, but we want to make sure everybody stays afloat. And Spotify is doing music relief with playlists and kind of doing their part to keep people calm and provide them with some entertainment. LVMH is a luxury brand that's supplying several million surgical masks to healthcare workers in France. So that's a great example of a company helping people on the front lines. And when that happens, that means the brand is on the front lines too. They're all in it together. Miller Lite is supporting bartenders who obviously are experiencing huge losses right now. Estee Lauder is also producing hand sanitizer, and Giorgio Armani is donating $44 million to fight coronavirus in Italy. He's an Italian designer, so it's really great that he's helping through donation. And there are all these different ways in these examples that we see people helping. There are people donating money, donating supplies, creating helpful content for people that are adjusting to a new life at home. So these are just some ways that you can show your audience, we care about you and we want to help you during this time. We're a brand for the people. And the last type of strategy was about facilitating connection. So Twitch is a really cool example. They're a streaming service that is pretty focused on the gaming community, and they are helping all kinds of people, like freelancers and artists and a bunch of people get paid to be streaming their services and offerings through Twitch. So that's kind of a cool example of a platform that didn't really have to pivot their offerings, but they understand how useful it is and how applicable it is during this time. Netflix Party, you get to synchronize what you're watching with a group of friends, and you're all watching remotely from your homes, and that way you get to feel like you're watching TV or movies with other people. Chipotle is doing a virtual lunch gathering. So they say, let's connect, have some fun, and make some new friends. They understand how stressful things are, and they're kind of trying to bring some connection and some levity to this time. So this is definitely the most community-oriented strategy, because you're getting people together, you're getting them to share with each other and make jokes and find support and resources. But all of the companies that I just showed you, I think, are doing great by showing how they're people focused. And interestingly, one of the biggest pieces of feedback that this one branding agency got from about 25,000 respondents is that a lot of consumers are really worried about employees' safety and their working conditions. So not only is it important to show your audience that you as a brand are very people focused, but that you're also walking the walk. You're not just talking the talk by protecting your employees. So something that I haven't seen enough of, I've seen a little bit of it, but I think really every brand should be doing this, is talking about how new policies or systems in place are specifically helping your workforce during this time. Are you making sure that the factory conditions are sanitary and safe? Are you paying people even when they're not coming to work? All of these things that kind of protect the workforce, because it feels a lot better to support a company that you know is being humane and ethical towards their workers. So initially we were talking about external community building, about what does it mean as a brand to be relating to your audience and to be having an active dialogue with them. But internal community building is just as important right now. As a leader, how are you motivating and relating to your team? Because everybody is freaking out and they need to be looking to a leader. So in the same way that a consumer community would be looking to their brand as a leader, a team would be looking to their manager, director, founder, CEO for the same kind of leadership. And these things are actually feeding each other. The values that you should be communicating to the outside world should be exactly mirrored in your internal culture and team building. So here are some tips on how to be a really effective internal leader. First, it's really important to have integrity. So don't make promises that you're not sure you can keep. If you say stuff like, I'm confident that we won't have to do any layoffs at all, and then later you have to do layoffs, that's not a great sign of integrity. So make sure that you're being really honest and you're acknowledging the situation. And kind of relatedly, it's really important to balance confidence with humility. And another way of saying that is balancing optimism with realism. So it's important to be confident, but it's also really important to acknowledge, you know what, this is a totally unprecedented situation. None of us really know what to do. We're just trying our best. Really, you're just trying to build trust with your team. Similar to that is that as a leader, it's really important to be proactive and not reactive. So if there's a crisis happening out in the world, if you are running in circles and just reading the news every hour and just totally being in a reactive state to the world, then that's going to carry into your team, and that's not good. So it's important to be proactive, to survey the landscape and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're not just going to be passive and create some policy and that's it. We're actually going to create a task force and we're all working together and it's something that's dynamically evolving. We're being proactive and creative and things are much more collaborative, saying we're all working together and you as the leader can spearhead those efforts. And just being empathetic and agile because we really don't know everyone's situation. Some people could be living in a house with really sick people or taking care of kids without having any help or maybe even going through a loss and going through grief. So just to be empathetic and understanding about that and realizing that you can't expect your team to be at optimum productivity levels, when you show that kind of understanding, people will trust you and look to you and have more confidence in you as a leader even more. And being human, so what I was kind of talking about before for the brand marketing about having a really visible leader, it's not just important to be visible, it's important to be really real. Let's actually analyze the way that I started this call. I started it in a really personal way. I shared about myself. I'm not using a Zoom background on purpose, actually. I want you to see that I'm a fellow entrepreneur in my living room and I'm home and we're all home together. It's also a really great opportunity to just get to know your team. So now you guys know what my home looks like. You're understanding what your employees' home life is like. And you can even do a bunch of icebreakers on calls and stuff like that just to kind of lighten things up because people don't have that normal office chatter. So you can even use it as an excuse to go really deep and talk about how you're feeling and what you're dealing with, or just silly things about what it's like to be at home or be with your kids or stuff like that. But all of these tips are there to help you build a really cohesive team that understands how to communicate with each other and adapt during a crisis. Things can change, maybe like the structure of the company has to change, or someone needs to take a break, or someone gets sick or something, and you need to be able to be a cohesive unit. So once you have that team communication and you're offering them support and resources, that's what I would love to see marketed from a brand. I would love to see more employer marketing, more talk about corporate culture and how that's shifting, because that used to be a bonus piece of content for marketing your brand. But considering that almost 80% of consumers are now highly concerned about this, they want to be hearing exactly how you're handling the pandemic. So just take that opportunity to show what a strong team you are and what a strong leader you are and how you're looking out for people that are working with you. Just thinking about all of these things, let's forecast into the future and ask, okay, well, what does this look like after COVID? After we deal with the pandemic and put people first, how is this going to affect branding and marketing in the long haul? I do think that there are going to be some really interesting long-term effects. One would be redefining what it means to have brand loyalty. Because the way that we define brand loyalty now is that a customer is loyal to a brand by coming again and again and buying their products or services. But I think that a brand should be just as loyal to its customers and giving them support and community and resources without necessarily expecting things in return. So I think that that kind of customer first attitude is going to prove really effective and useful and carry on past COVID. Another thing is just thinking about how we work. Up until a month ago, offices kind of operated like a factory, like we're all these productivity machines and we're just trying to get as much done in as short of a time as possible. But really, when you treat your team more like a family or cohesive group where you're able to support each other, maybe we'll find that things go even farther than they did before and that we feel like we can communicate easier with each other. We can be more creative and uplift the brand in many ways. There will definitely be a lot of losses in the business world. There will be a lot of companies that have to close, and that will be very, very humbling. Entrepreneurship and business is a gift. To succeed and to make it past this pandemic is not just because companies and brands work really hard, it's because they're getting supported by their audiences. So just kind of putting that in perspective of what it takes to run a successful team and brand and cultivate a really engaged, loyal audience. Those are my tips about community building during the pandemic. Really, it's just most important to be highlighting the humanity of your brand, eliciting trust in your audience, showing how you can be helpful and how you can be the hero, showing how you're walking your walk and taking care of your team and all the different ways that you would do that. This is a really tough situation. It's something that none of us have ever lived through. It's totally unprecedented, and for for us to really be able to do everything that we can to make people's lives easier and to make people healthier and happier, that's really our job as leaders in our companies and leaders in our industry. So thank you so much for listening to my talk. I really appreciate it. I hope it was helpful. And feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. There's a bunch of resources there that might be able to help. There's actually a Forbes article about my agency about how to create online communities. So if you're thinking about creating a Facebook group or a Slack community, there's some really helpful tips in there. And I'm going to keep updating it with more COVID specific tips. So feel free to follow me there. And I hope you have a healthy, safe, and sane rest of your day.